people will be joining as we move along. But I want to thank everyone for coming this morning. This is always, I know it's, especially since we're working with the business community primary, it's always hard finding times of day to do this. So my goal is to have this be about 45 minutes of your time and to be a continuing conversation. I just want to recognize before we start a few of our guests here, and it's important that they're here because this is a listening session, and the people on this call, your town board members, are the ones who are going to use this constructive feedback to hopefully help shape a program that utilizes the sizable federal dollars we've received, which we'll get into in a little bit detail. So we have Councilwoman Patrina Freeman, Councilwoman Kimmy Romeo, Deputy Supervisor, Member of the Council John Perticone, and we also have our County Legislator Joe Morelli Jr., who represents the 17th District. We also have, I think, from the West Irondequoit School Board, a good partner, Dave Long, the president of the school board. I just noticed that. And we also have former comptroller Annie Seeley, always keeping an eye on us. So, Annie, you better ask a question when we get here, because I want to be grilled by you, because I'm sure you would love to be able to administer $25 million from the federal government. We also have with us today, who you're going to hear from shortly, Alice Willis from the Irondequoit Chamber of Commerce, who is the great leader of that organization, as well as Representative Joe Morelli. The goal of this session really is to help inform the town board as we move to allocate money received from the federal government, which again we'll detail a little bit further. The federal government has, in addition to a number of other programs, provided local governments with a lot of latitude to help with the recovery from COVID. And I think one thing our town board embraces and accepts is the fact that we don't have all the answers. And we want to make sure that if we're putting programs together that potentially spend hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars, we're doing a canvass of the community and identifying needs. So I'll leave it at that. At first, I just wanted to give Alice Willis from the Chamber of Commerce an opportunity to say a few words. Alice has been a good co-host of this and really helped boost our participation for this morning's session. So Alice, if you wanted to say a few words.
Good morning, and thanks to all the business owners that are joining us before they start their busy days. I'm thanking all the town of Irondequoit and the board and everyone else on the call that's partnering with us to make this happen. The Irondequoit Chamber has always had a good working relationship with the town, which is good for our business community. We want to make sure that we're continuing to work together to make sure we find good uses for this federal funding to meet your needs, so that we can keep our local businesses growing and in turn make our community grow. This meeting is an opportunity for you to speak. Dave reached out to us because he wanted input from all of you, to see where your needs are. It's been a tough year, and I know we had the RISE program to provide grants to businesses that lost income due to COVID, and now there's the new American Rescue Plan that will be receiving funding. So we really do want your input and your ideas and your concerns, and hopefully we'll come up with a plan that's best for you. And lastly, we just want to make sure that there's time for everyone to speak. So I guess I'll let Joe Morelli maybe talk more about the details of the rescue plan.
Sure, Joe, go ahead. And I'm glad. I just want to first thank Joe for being on the, I know he has a busy day and this was important to him, obviously, and I just wanted to give him an opportunity, to hear from hopefully the end recipients of this funding, but also give an overview of what's been going on the past few months in Washington. A lot happening, and hopefully Joe can synthesize it and bring it down to our level a bit. So thank you, Congressman Morelli. The floor is yours.
Thanks so much. Good morning, everyone. Madam President, thank you for all that you do and that the Chamber does to continue to be an important part of Irondequoit. I'm very, very grateful as an Irondequoit resident, particularly grateful to the Chamber, and very, very grateful as well to my partners in government, the supervisor who I was with yesterday and with Kimmy Romeo yesterday for an important announcement about the so-called backyard of Town Hall, which is going to be really, really beautiful. I'm really excited about that and the fact that some of the money from the American Rescue Plan will find its way into the redevelopment of the town campus. And also my friend Patrina Freeman, who I see on the call, and my buddy John Perticone, who I've known for more years than John or I would care to recount, but it's always great to be with them. And I see Joseph Morelli Jr. is on there, and I haven't seen him in a few days. He's been away on business, so it's nice to at least catch up via Zoom. I do first want to say just something about Irondequoit before I talk about the rescue plan and what's been going on in Washington. And that is, and this is largely because of the leadership of the board, the leadership of the chamber. I mean, the transformation in the town over the last 8 years has been nothing short of remarkable, whether it's the library, which is the envy of so many different communities around the region, as well as the DPW, the garage, which is definitely the envy. Every time I go over there, I marvel at it. The redevelopment of the mall. I've been blessed to be able to participate and help and find the funding for soccer and lacrosse fields up at Camp Eastman and the baseball fields on Kings Highway. So, I mean, the town is clearly on the move, and all the people on this call should be very, very proud of the incredible work that they've done. And I'm always happy to receive a call from my friend, the town supervisor, with new exciting news about even more developments that's making our town the destination place for Monroe County. So let me just talk about what's been going on in Washington. And, just to sort of set the stage for this, we were confronted, as all of you were, about 14 months ago with this enormous crisis. And I think for those of us in Washington and the people in Albany and the county executive and others who have responsibility for public health issues, we weren't really sure how broadly this was going to impact us, both from a public health point of view and certainly from an economic point of view. And I see my friend Sarah Clark on there from the New York State Assembly. So good morning, Sarah. 2 days in a row. How lucky can I get? So we were confronted with not really knowing what to do. But what we did know is that this was going to have an enormous impact economically, as well as from a public health perspective. So we did a number of things early on, including the CARES Act. And the CARES Act was really focused on trying to get testing, trying to make sure that we could meet the need for personal protective equipment for our frontline workers, make sure we had enough ventilators because those were in short supply, as you recall. So a lot of it was in the immediate, let's deal with, first of all, the public health crisis, and let's help stand up small businesses. So we came up with the PPP, Paycheck Protection Program, which was intended to help small businesses primarily, the enhanced unemployment. So that got done, but the CARES Act was passed many, many months ago. And in the intervening time, many of those benefits ran out, and we continued to see the impacts of the pandemic. So we did some work in December, which was really short-term in many ways, and then recently passed the American Rescue Plan, which I was a co-sponsor of and was happy to support. So I'll just tell you, just some of the thinking behind the American Rescue Plan was we had still a long way to go, both in terms of the public health situation we continue to find ourselves in. Although at this point, when we did the American Rescue Plan just several weeks ago, the focus turned, while testing is still important, really turned more to how do we get people vaccinated. And every day I track in the New York Times the number of Americans who are fully vaccinated, or at least have one dose if you're taking either the Pfizer or Moderna vaccine. And those numbers are growing. We're getting to a good place, but there's still more to be done. And frankly, now the supply of vaccinations is outpaced the demand, and we're really trying to increase the demand and make sure people feel comfortable taking it. So that was really one of the big issues still in the American Rescue Plan. Let's crush the virus. We talk about that often in Washington. Let's crush the virus. Let's make sure people get vaccinations. The second was to continue to offer support for small businesses. The supervisor and I were privileged to be at Seabreeze Park earlier this week, where they, or I guess it was last week, where we announced the opening of Seabreeze. But they went 18 months, and there's so many businesses, particularly those that are seasonal, that went for a long period of time without any revenues. So we wanted to continue to support small businesses through the PPP and other enhancements. We wanted to uplift families that were struggling, so we extended the enhanced unemployment benefits, although at a lower level. We invested in childcare resources, including the expansion of the child tax credit, which should be helpful to families with children. And as I said, the vaccines. But one of the big features, which the supervisor referenced, was we were very concerned about state and local governments. They're often very sensitive to economic highs and lows. And so the state government, for instance, was facing significant shortfalls because much of their income is derived from personal income taxes, business taxes, and those are very sensitive to economic conditions. So a significant amount of money for state and local governments, and the supervisor can tell you more about the, I think it was over $20 million, $23 million to the town of Irondequoit, which will come in a couple different tranches. But to continue to prioritize the needs of working families. And we're making, I think, important steps. I think the numbers are getting better. Certainly the pandemic numbers are getting better. So now really the focus is turning towards revitalizing the economy. And we're doing that. The president has proposed the American Jobs Plan, also proposed the American Families Plan. So those are big investments, frankly, in infrastructure, and infrastructure sort of writ large. So it's not just roads and bridges, but it's broadband to make sure that every American is connected. Action to fight climate change, which we see the impacts of every day. I was reading the Democratic Chronicle this morning that out west, the soil is drier than it was even last year at this time, where we endured last season, as you know, record wildfires. So the fires on the West Coast are a direct result, scientists believe, of climate change. So there's so much more that we have to do in that space. I serve on 4 standing committees. I'm only one of 7 members out of the 435 that has been selected for 4 standing committees. So I serve on the Budget Committee. I serve on the Education and Labor Committee. I serve on the House Armed Services Committee. And I serve on the Rules Committee, which is essentially the traffic cop for legislation that goes to the House. We're the final committee to sign off, and we determine which amendments would be appropriate to be considered during debate. So we have a long way to go. We're really working at this. I will tell you this, that in terms of our conversations with economists nationally, a bolder investment is what they're telling us is what we need. And if you think about the 2007, 2008 Great Recession, it took us nearly 10 years to get to pre-recession levels of employment and economic activity. So the investment that we're making now are really directed at making sure, first of all, that a rising tide lifts all boats. So we're very concerned about racial equity, racial equality, racial expansion of the workforce to make sure that diversity is a significant part of it, but also that we want to make sure the investments are significant so that we reach pre-pandemic levels much sooner than we did in the Great Recession. And people like Jerome Powell, who's the chair of the Federal Reserve, and other economists, frankly, on the spectrum, whether you're sort of a liberal economist or a conservative economist, they've been telling us at the federal level, continue to invest in the American people. And that's the quickest way out of this and to get back to what we all remember as pre-pandemic times. So I'm happy to answer any further questions. I don't want to go on too long. I apologize for the sort of long-winded discussion, but there's a lot going on, and we're working very hard at trying to get something on the American Jobs Plan, the American Families Plan, shortly after we return, hopefully before the July 4th break. But if not, we'll work through July to try to get some resolution on this. And I'm happy, Alice, Dave, to take any questions that people might have, but I'm really grateful for the opportunity to spend some time with you this morning.
All right. Do you expect an infrastructure bill, if it passes, to be similar to this, whereas there would be allocations made to local governments, or is that kind of the model moving forward?
Well, I think that's undecided. Right now, we're in a conversation with our Republican colleagues to find out whether we can do this through what they call regular order, which would mean getting at least 60 votes in the United States Senate to avoid cloture vote. If we can't do that, we'll do it through a process called reconciliation, which you can do once every fiscal year, and you can do it as long as you don't violate the so-called Byrd Rule, which was established to make sure that what we do in reconciliation is largely or almost exclusively a fiscal impact on the budget. So you can't take on issues like the minimum wage, you can't take on some other issues that are primarily policy in nature, but we're working that out. I think what you'll see in infrastructure will be, I'm not sure it'll be an allocation by municipality, but it will certainly include, when it comes to, for instance, surface transportation, we'll be looking to state government, the county governments, local governments, about what their priority projects are. So that will be very, very important. But I think it's too early to tell sort of how it gets fleshed out. And right now, I think we're waiting to hear back. The Republican Senate is advancing a proposal that's nearly $1 trillion on infrastructure. That's closer to the president's proposal than what the 500 billion or so that they originally proposed, which we consider too small to have a real stimulative impact on the economy and to address clearly the significant infrastructure needs that we've ignored for 20 years. Tens of thousands of bridges and roads in the United States are defective. So we have a great need. This isn't just, as they used to say in the Army, dig a hole and fill a hole, just keep doing busy work. This is work that needs to get done, has been ignored for far too long. So this is really an important inflection point around that. But we'll see over the next few months. But I clearly will be in touch with local partners to make sure that the most pressing needs that they have are addressed as quickly as we can get them.
Thanks, Joe. And at the end, if you're still around, perhaps some of our participants might have questions. I just wanted to give, and thank you, Joe, for that overview. It's very good to get your context, as always. I just want to give Assembly Member Sarah Clark, who has joined us this morning, just an opportunity to say hello and maybe talk a few minutes about just her efforts in Albany regarding small business and COVID recovery. Morning, Assembly Member.
Good morning. So good to start my day with all of you. I just wanted to join in the Assembly. I am on the Small Business Committee, and we are constantly trying to get feedback from folks. So joining this was really about listening to our small businesses and what challenges they are facing right now and what we can do to be helpful. We obviously passed $800 million in small business relief. Thank you to Congressman Joe Morelle for his support in getting those dollars that we were allowed to put together in a program that will support our business community. But now it's really about implementing that and making sure it's fixing what needs to be fixed and helping where it needs to help. So that's our goal as we start to roll out those programs and give those resources to everyone to use. Getting feedback is really the key here, and having the oversight we need to make sure, again, that these programs are doing what they're supposed to do. So I'm just really excited to be here and listen to all of you, and very thankful for all that our federal government is doing, from childcare to infrastructure and beyond, to really make a difference in investing in our communities, our families, our businesses, and everything to really make sure we recover equitable and equal across our state. So thank you.
Thank you, Assemblymember Clark. I'm going to get now to the kind of context for all of this and a presentation I put together, which I've been laboring over the Department of Treasury guidelines the past week, and it's like reading stereo instructions. It's hard to piece together, and it's a little intimidating. I tell people, as Joe alluded to, we have been awarded $22.5 million. It's hard to put into context how much money that is for us. Our budget is generally about $39 million. $23 million, if you compare our annual community development block grant program, that's about $900,000. So it's intimidating, and but it's a good problem to have, as I say. And our goal is to make sure we're getting it into the hands of people who need it the most. So let's start with the obvious. As people on this call know, COVID has had a devastating impact to businesses, governments, etc. To Joe's credit and his colleagues, they've been able to get money to local governments who, and not just for local governments for our budget. We're not keeping the money to pad our budgets. The goal of us is to serve as a conduit to get it to people who need it the most. We did receive about $900,000, a little more than that actually, in CARES Act funding, which was supplemental to our community development block grant funding. I could get into a whole other PowerPoint on why it's so crucial when the census numbers come out that we stay above 50,000 people, because that really does open up a lot of avenues for federal funding. I'll reserve that for another time and just be happy with where we were at this moment in time. The American Rescue Plan, as Joe said, secured an additional $22 million for the town. I rounded down. I think it's $22.45 million. I didn't want to be gluttonous, but it's a lot of money. And I just want to point out a lot of people on this call, and the Chamber was a good partner with this, took part in something known as the RISE program, which we used with that CARES Act funding. You know, when we got the CARES Act funding, our goal was to make sure we were using it to, I don't want to say stimulate the economy, because I don't think, you know, it was on par with the PPP program, but just to ensure that we were getting the money into the businesses and finite resources, but getting it into the businesses who needed it the most. We had 3 phases of the program. The grants ranged from $2,500 to $7,000, really depending on how severely the business was impacted from COVID. Obviously, restaurants, those which were required to close altogether for an extended period of time, were eligible for more money. The first phase really was just kind of a blanket that was last year, up to $5,000. It was really for all businesses. There were very few businesses, small businesses, I should say, that were not impacted by COVID and had some negative implications on their revenue. I can think of only a handful that came to us and said, we respectfully don't need any money. So we were able to get a lot of money out, and I'll get into the next slide just how much that was. The second phase, if you recall last December, November, December, this was the orange zone, saga where, I defended the state because I said the first time around they didn't like the broad stroke, and then when they tried to be a little more finite, there really were some businesses that were more adversely impacted by others in those orange zones. So we did provide a larger grant to those orange zone businesses, up to $7,000. And then phase 3, we basically provided a grant in the amount of a rebate for your town property taxes. Not all property taxes, and I think if we get into this conversation, we'll be able to talk about how we might be able to expand that phase 3 using this money, not in perpetuity, but just over the next few years as businesses look to recover. And here are the numbers. We're proud of this. $451,000 is, that's money right back into our local economy. I understand we never said this was going to be the be-all, end-all of people's problems, but, whether it's just allowing them for a purchase or just any, not having to make that town property tax payment, we recognize every little bit helps. So I think it was a program we put together with some thought, but also it was done very quickly, and I'm proud of the administration of it. I think we did about twice as much as any other town in Monroe County. So it's something that, again, we don't spike the football, but we were happy to be able to help and happy to administer these grants. And it kind of laid the foundation and provided kind of that infrastructure and some best practices to moving forward as we are kind of in this new ball game of grant administration. American Rescue Plan, signed on the 12th by the president. $1.9 trillion, which I can't even, to me, it's monopoly money. It's money that's great to jumpstart the economy. I can't even fathom how much money that is. But really to jumpstart the economy, defeat COVID, recover. I think the most attention was paid to the direct stimulus payments that most Americans hopefully received. As Joe said, there was a national vaccination program. There was direct small business support, which I'll get to in the next slide. I don't want to not use this opportunity to plug some programs administered by the Small Business Administration. I think that can provide direct assistance to certain businesses. Money for schools to reopen. And really, I think what's just terrific, and Joe alluded to this a little bit, but it's really some strong anti-poverty initiatives. They say this might be the strongest anti-poverty effort since the New Deal, and there's been some pretty significant anti-poverty efforts since that with regards to child care, earned income tax credit, many others. One theme of the American Rescue Plan is the need to make sure that the recovery is experienced by all, and all people have the opportunity to take part in this recovery. So I think that's something the town is going to use as a compass moving forward. So again, I would be remiss if I didn't just mention some of these small business grant SBA programs. Some of them were new under the CARES Act. Obviously the money for the restaurants, hopefully, I don't know if those have been made available yet. I'm sure Kelly Bush would be able to tell me because she's very active in her state organization. But I'm glad to see some targeted relief that these businesses can tap into. And obviously the PPP was essential for so many businesses in Irondequoit. And I think looking back, such a valuable program and a well-needed program, and a program that really saved our economy, particularly our small businesses. But I just would be remiss if I didn't take the opportunity. Go to SBA.gov, see if anything is there for you. Don't wait for the town. If there's already programs set up, and that wouldn't preclude you from benefiting from a grant program we set up as well. But just take a look for yourself. Okay, so within the American Rescue Plan is, as Joe alluded to, a state and local recovery fund. $350 billion to, in relief, not $350 billion to every state, but every state receives money, every local government receives money, county, city, village, town, tribal government in America. It's a portion based on a formula. Again, the town being a community development block grant entitlement community. We benefited greatly from this, $22.5 million, the most of any town in Monroe County. And again, I'll just underscore, we've never had an opportunity to spend money like this before. I don't spend money, to invest money like this before. This is us entering into a whole new realm. And again, it's a good problem to have, but one that we want to make sure we're being thoughtful, but have a sense of urgency moving forward, because we know that the goal of this is to get this money into the hands of the people who need it for the recovery. It's not a blank check. The money must be spent within guidelines established by the Department of Treasury. Those draft guidelines were released early last week. They're very long. I used them to develop this PowerPoint. I believe they are accurate, but nevertheless, there are a lot of eligible uses outlined, and not a lot of use. They don't go out of their way to say things you can't do, which was good for us, but still have a very clear idea of what they really are intending this money to be used for. The money must be spent or encumbered. There's a debate over that by the end of 2024. Now, this is important. There's four kind of primary avenues of how we can use this money. The first is really the most relevant for this conversation. It's to respond to the public health emergency and its negative impacts, whether that's on households, small businesses, non-for-profits, or impacted industries. It went out of its way to identify impacted industries such as tourism, travel, hospitality. So hopefully this will be able to serve as an avenue for conduit to help out our tourism businesses such as Seabreeze. To respond to workers performing essential work during COVID emergency by providing premium pay to eligible workers. That's more geared towards healthcare, frontline workers. It can be expanded to other industries where we're really on the front lines of COVID. So that's a conversation worth having, and something that I don't think we're dismissing. Perhaps the need to make sure that those industries, it's not a reward, but to make sure that we're able to attract people to work in those industries, knowing how essential they really are. Number three, just to allow, I wish this was more relevant to the town, but revenue restoration. It looks like we're not going to, thankfully we ended the year better than we initially had thought, which is good. I think we'll be able to use some revenue recovery. My comptroller, Diana Marsh, and I'm sure Andy Seeley would love to have this problem, our former comptroller, but I think the states and the counties perhaps are going to be more beneficial of that revenue restoration. We budget conservatively sometimes on sales tax revenue, which is good in this instance. We didn't have a huge hole to dig ourselves out of. So number three, perhaps not as much as I want, because that's really unrestricted aid you get. I don't think we're going to be able to use as much of that as we might have thought. And then number four, it's really infrastructure investments, but really particular to water, sewer, broadband. That can have certain tangents, such as stormwater management, etc. So we will be able to use a good portion of number four for our infrastructure. So the question we're here to answer is, and we need your feedback not just today but moving forward, is how can the town address the negative impacts of COVID, help businesses recover? Within the guidelines, eligible uses for business support include things like job training programs for displaced workers. That's something the town's never ventured in. It doesn't mean it's something we can't invest in through some of the existing efforts going on in Monroe County if they're particularly directed towards our residents. Direct support to small businesses and or nonprofits. That's really kind of the big umbrella, the silo, which I think a lot of this conversation can find itself in. That can be loans or grants to mitigate the financial hardship, such as declines in revenues or impacts of periods of business closure. That's a very big catch-all. That's kind of the broad language, I think, that allows us to be a little bit expansive in our efforts to target business recovery. Again, there's probably a few people on this call who weren't adversely impacted your business by COVID. That's going to allow us really to take into account for that. It's what guided the RISE program, and now we probably have the ability to invest even more resources, not just to supplant lost revenue, but to make sure that moving forward, if the economic recovery is not happening at a pace, or if you're playing catch up, perhaps you're able to make those capital investments. You're able to make those, you're not deferring purchases or investments in your business, expansion perhaps. Again, the impacted industries, which are identified as tourism, travel, hospitality, and then investing in broadband infrastructure. That's a conversation you're seeing both at the state level, the federal level, and now locally. We benefit in Irondequoit. We've had a quicker broadband build out than other communities, particularly through Greenlight, but I recognize there still are gaps, particularly in our business corridor. So is this an opportunity for us to invest in making sure that our entire town, in every corner of our business community, has access to broadband infrastructure? Some ways, again, we might consider, this is just based on previous kind of experiences. We've done it before, and there's no reason why we couldn't consider offsetting the property tax burden on businesses. That's something that's locked in. I also recognize not every business pays property taxes. You might have it identified on a pro rata share in your lease. But one thing we learned is we were hoping more businesses would have applied in phase 3, but a lot of them simply, it's not clearly identified what their property tax burden is, so we might have to just think a little bit further outside the box for that. Obviously, to offset lost revenue due to COVID, grant assistance for capital upgrades to your business or other investments. One thing we might target is, there's still a handful of empty storefronts, blighted. We might consider them blighted. They're empty, empty at the very least. Do we want to incentivize businesses to fix those up? If businesses are looking to locate in Irondequoit, do we want to provide a financial incentive to them to locate in those vacant storefronts? And grants to businesses. This goes without saying. And I know there's some state legislation that might require this, but we want to make sure you can continue to respond to COVID if you need to through physical barriers, PPP, etc. But also make sure if we have to go through this again, you're ready. And that's really something that's going to be guided by the business community. We're not going to set standards in Irondequoit for what businesses need to do, but if those are investments that businesses want to make, I think it's something we can help facilitate. So things we're looking from our folks on the call, and again, we're going to ask for feedback shortly, and I know this is a lot to absorb. That's why this is not, we're videotaping this. It's going to be available on Facebook Live, iCat, etc. And I don't want to put you on the spot, but the things we need to hear are, what are your continuing challenges as you emerge from COVID? And those can relate to COVID. They can, you're free to say, what if COVID didn't exist, what are your challenges as well? I understand, I've been talking with the business community long before COVID. I understand what your issues are. I understand some of them are things we can control at the town. Most of them are not. But we want to be able to respond, hear them, and figure out how we might be able to address and respond to some of those issues. Are there any existing programs the town could supplement? We don't want to reinvent the wheel, so we're interested to hear if there's other programs you've utilized that are working that we might be helped to supplement. How can we create, I've been talking a lot with my counterparts in other towns, and one thing I think we've agreed to is not create what's known as a race to the bottom. We don't want to just, you see this a lot with states, unfortunately, rightfully so. It's a dog-eat-dog world where you're competing for business, but we don't want to make conditions so low that we're purging other towns' businesses and vice versa. But if a business is looking to expand or start anywhere, how can we make Irondequoit attractive to that and also help existing businesses grow? And are there any industries in particular that really need targeted help, perhaps more concise help? And I'll just say, you're going to be hearing probably a lot from the town about ways we're using this program. One thing we've already put in motion is the first-time homebuyer assistance program. We haven't made it live yet, but we've started to take the steps towards conceiving a program and working with perhaps an administrator to figure out how we can make first-time homebuyers, not just first-time homebuyers, first-generation homebuyers competitive in the Irondequoit market. I understand if there's any realtors on the call, this is a tough time to create a program like that. Again, this is a 3.5-year window we can operate this, so our goal is to provide opportunity. I've talked with Commissioner Kiley, and we're already working on a sewer capital investment plan. That's the infrastructure we need. I think Congress was clear that they want to make sure that infrastructure is being tended to, particularly drinking water, but also sewer water as well. Assistance to Irondequoit-based not-for-profits, particularly those involved in healthcare delivery. We don't have a ton, but Congress was clear that those are the types of organizations that we can provide assistance to, and I think we'll be looking to do that. And one thing that's always on our mind, and I know Carrie Ivers from my staff is on, but I think we can create a very solid lead abatement program. We have a housing stock, and I think that the year is 1977, or I think it's 77, generally when, Carrie will point out in the chat if I'm wrong, but if a house is built after 77 or sometime in the 70s, if it was built before then, generally it's a higher chance of having lead-based paint before new standards were put in. We have an old housing stock. More than relative to other suburbs, our housing stock was largely built out before that period of time. So lead abatement continues to be a concern of ours, and one that we hopefully can mitigate. Okay, so again, we have till the end of the hour. I don't know if we'll need that much time. I want to hear from you now. I also want to let you know that we will be putting out an online survey, which hopefully the chamber and yourselves can help disseminate. That'll be ready by the end of the week. It will have just a series of questions that kind of fall within the universe of this presentation. Feedback will be received through supervisor@irondequoit.org. And again, in the coming months, the town board is going to use the feedback we received to help inform a decision about some programs we formulate really to help our small business economy. Okay, with that, I'm going to stop sharing. And how do I stop sharing? Stop share. Okay, we are back. So Mike is controlling the back and forth. Mike Moss from our staff. I see just Kelly Bush, who was always very thoughtful with this, wrote in the chat some ideas, grants for updating filtration systems, updates to kitchens and buildings to handle takeout. When we get industry-specific guidance for the HEROES Act, the HEROES Act was what I was referencing, Kelly. I think there's still a lot of information, and I think our goal might be to help you with the HEROES Act and implement the provisions of that HEROES Act. And we would love discounted passes to ICC Business Center for staff. Look, always worth entertaining, Kelly. This is about opportunity. If it's something we can do within the guidelines of the federal grant, we're happy to do it, and it's not something perhaps that would even need permission from the grant. So I love that comment. I know staff retention is huge for businesses like you now, and I don't know if Joe or anyone else had anything to add to that, but that's very good feedback, especially specific to your business, Kelly, because our restaurants really have been on our radar all year. I've thought about you and your cohorts often and just how challenging this has been, and you've done such an incredible job in innovating and finding a path through this. But that feedback is very well received.
I would just add this, if I can. You know what? I think to Kelly's point, you may see coming out of the pandemic some changes that people have made to their behaviors and habits that will continue on after the pandemic. So you may see more takeout. People who, before this went to Wegmans, who now use Instacart, and decide after the pandemic, you know what, that was pretty convenient, so I'll do that. So I think some of the things, we'll be interested to see, I think, as policymakers, just what kinds of changes that were made continue. I think even telecommuting, people working from home, will continue for those businesses that can have people do that. So it's just going to be interesting, and I think that's why you're building flexibility into this makes so much sense. So I appreciate that, and I think it will be interesting to see how our behavior and changes will continue long after the pandemic has stopped being an immediate public crisis.
Thank you, Joe.
I was going to say, I hear a lot from people who have home-based businesses, because they don't have brick and mortar and don't have, property taxes and all that, that they sometimes feel like they get forgotten. And also what Joe just said about some businesses, I know being in the payroll industry, I know a lot of people are rethinking actually having brick and mortar businesses, and everyone's just going to stay at home. So they might need help for, better computer systems, safe, security, and all of that.
Yeah, I'll tell you, Kelly, Alice, one of the things that I've introduced in the House is to bring back the home office deduction. That was eliminated in the 2017 Tax Act. And it just seems to me, with so many people now, either owners of businesses or people who are now working from home and having to spend dollars even to perhaps to increase their broadband um, um, receptivity, new routers, new equipment at home, new printers, that you really ought to be able to deduct that as a business expense. So we've reintroduced that. I'm hoping to get that in the American Job Plan, continue to push for that with the Ways and Means Committee, because I think that would provide some benefit to people who are home and who have home-based businesses. See how it goes, but I think it's being received pretty well by people, but you know, it's a long way between drafting and implementation.
And Alice, thank you for pointing out the home-based businesses. You know, at the time when we were starting the RISE program, our concern was finite resources, right? And, you know, we started with the people who had, you know, the thinking was, well, home-based businesses are already akin to being at home, didn't have the brick and mortar. I think you're right, though. I recognize everyone's losing revenue. We don't want the home-based businesses to go away. There are residents. They live here. They have a vested interest in this community. So as the program went on, we started to be more expansive in our eligibility for home-based businesses. And I think as we move forward, as long as it's no legal restriction from the feds guidelines, that I think that's something certainly the town can look to include in any program with parameters, of course. But I think we can develop criteria to make sure that they can experience and participate in these programs. Sally Steinwach, always good to hear from you. Thank you. You know, a good thing, you know, I love that you're renting a vacant storefront for arts, crafts, pre-prepared food, music, consignment. I don't know if that would be a not-for-profit or for-profit. Definitely the type of business opportunity I think we can help facilitate through this. And, you know, the good thing about this was it did identify nonprofits kind of on par with the business community. I think it recognizes the role non-for-profits play in our economy now, and you really can't deny that, whether it's the arts, healthcare, service delivery. You know, it's huge, and a huge employer and a huge occupier of our business community. So I think absolutely we would love to create a program that would allow you know, an effort like that to tap into. For profit, gotcha. Very good. And as always, Sally, you can ping us if you have ideas, even in the interim. We're happy to facilitate that with you. Mike, does anyone have their hand raised?
Nope, no hands raised at this time, but if you'd like to ask a question, you can hit the raise hand button or *9 if you've dialed in.
I know the chat sometimes is more efficient.
Hey,
And again,
do you guys have an idea of the blocks of money, how you're going to spend it already, like earmark, like for infrastructure? You've already kind of kept them out. And
no, I can tell you though, just you know, you start to write things on the back of a napkin, and you think you're putting together the most comprehensive recovery plan that's spending just unlimited amounts of money, and then you realize it's only about $10 million, which again, $10 million is anything beyond what we've ever had the ability to invest in. So the short answer is no. Our home ownership program, we pegged at about $2 million over 3 years. You know, we're probably going to be able to invest some of a very probably minimal amount in the backyard project that Joe was talking about, because it relates to stormwater. I would say probably you know, a minuscule fraction of the total amount, maybe $250,000, if that. It's challenging. I think a lot of communities were thinking they were going to get a blank check and just use it however they wanted, pay off their debt, and say it was beneficial for taxpayers. To their credit, Congress and the Department of Treasury really did kind of create framework under how you can spend this. So we also don't want to rush to spend this either. I think we also want to see what's going on throughout the community as well, to see if we can tap into any county-wide efforts perhaps. So the good thing is you're seeing a lot more collaboration I think between my cohorts, counterparts at the towns, but also countywide, the Council of Governments that the county executive has convened. I think there's a drive to collaborate more on this. WMOB. So Justin, good question. The question was for any commitment priority for WMOB. You know, Congress was kind of alluded to this, and the Treasury made it even more clear. There is a desire to have these dollars serve as a mechanism to provide opportunity for those who were hit by the pandemic the hardest, and whether it's the economic impact or the pandemic itself, it recognized and and acknowledge that traditionally that was communities of color. And I think what we're going to do is be mindful of that. I think our home ownership program, and this isn't the business side, but I think that those principles can guide us as we're looking to create economic opportunity. You know, you talk about first generation home buyers, and a lot of people in communities of color are those first generation home buyers. So that might be a way to provide that opportunity for those, people in those communities. And I think that's our goal. That's going to drive what we do. You know, what we're going to do is work very closely with the Eye Care Commission that Councilwoman Freeman is chairing, working with our community, the Irondequoit Commission Advancing Racial Equity. But, you know, kind of woven through the fabric of all those guidelines is a not a suggestion, almost a charge to make sure that this money is not only being there's equity in its distribution, but possibly even going out of your way to ensure that those people who have historically been left out of programs like this are provided opportunity as well. So on the women's side, I don't know if there's any provision for women-owned businesses. I do recognize that there's additional barriers for women-owned businesses, so certainly that could be something that drives us as well. And it's a good comment, and thank you for keeping that fresh on our head. Renewed public relations campaign for businesses. Sally, if we can do it within the guidelines, I'm sure we could put something like that. I would love to do something like that. I don't know if marketing dollars is something that Congress had envisioned, but you know, we'll look for latitude in those guidelines. And you're right, we can always do more to market our business. We've worked well with the chamber. Alice is. I just want to, for the people on the call, I just want to give a plug to the chamber as well. Alice does this as a labor of love. You know, she and a core group of others really have kept the chamber afloat over the past 5 years, and now have, I think, a foundation for a sustainable path moving forward. And it's not easy. Small town chambers serve such an important role. They're hard to sustain, but if you're not on the chamber on this call, I'd like you to consider joining. I think there's value in it. The more united our business community is, I think the better we are all together. So that's my plug for Alice.
Yeah, thank you. And it's been challenging the last year because usually what we do as a chamber is get people together, and do business together. So it's been a challenge, and we're not the only ones. So I've been doing events. We have one coming up at Comedy at the Carlson on Tuesday, June 9th. Or Wednesday, June 9th. And I'm doing it with East Rochester and so a lot of the smaller chambers are trying to do more events together to bring more people together, because we're all kind of struggling with not being able to meet the past year.
Indeed.
So that's free to all chamber members, $10 at the door if you're not a chamber member, and anyone can come.
Okay, thank you, Alice, and we'll make sure that people get information about the chamber and how they can find out more information. So we're at about 45 minutes. I think we don't have any further feedback in the chat. I did want to just thank everyone for participating. Even the feedback we got in the past 20 minutes, extremely helpful to have your perspective. That's really good to get the wheels turning in our heads. We're going to leave it open to feedback over the next few months. Supervisor@irondequoit.org. We're certainly going to publicize, what the intent of this is. I always say, you don't have to sit through a 45-minute Zoom recording to figure out what we're looking to do. I know it's what better way to spend a morning listening to me talk for half an hour, but we want to make sure people know what the town board intends to do and how they can be helpful in informing that decision. So we'll have the survey out by the end of the week, and just want to again thank the Chamber of Commerce for partnering with us. Thank you, Congressman Morelli, for ensuring local communities are targeted and lifted up in the recovery. Thank you, Assemblymember Clark. Certainly a lot of good stuff in this year's state budget for local communities, and all of our other elected.
Quickly say on that, because we do have some arts funding and particular restaurant funding as well, but I'll get that to you, Alice, to distribute maybe for your members as the guidance comes down.
Great. That's very good to hear. I know Joe is a former chair of the Tourism Arts Committee in the Assembly, and I'm sure he had all sorts of good programs like that. We weren't spending money like back in those days, right, Joe?
Well, we did spend quite a bit of money, but not like this. And people should know too, for arts organizations, the county just announced use of its federal money for small arts organization grants. And in the federal law, there's also support for restaurants and some shuttered venues, although I'm not sure they would qualify in Irondequoit, but we should look at them. But there's a whole host of, I think the biggest challenge is just communicating, which is why it's so important, why I'm so grateful to you, Dave, for doing this, and Alice, because getting the information out and getting people thinking about the programs, and then at least asking questions about whether they qualify is really the most important thing. We could appropriate all the money in the world, but if people aren't aware of it and don't avail themselves of it, it's for naught. So really appreciate this opportunity to spend time with you. So thank you to both of you.
All right, and I want to thank all of our elected officials, Councilwoman Romeo, Councilwoman Freeman, Deputy Supervisor Perticone, County Legislator Joe Morelli Jr., as well as our friend Mike Moss, who's in the basement of Town Hall, for setting this up and walking me through how to do a Zoom webinar. All right, that's it, everyone. Thanks for joining. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll keep at this. Take care.